Can you take a bone stock, half disassembled Pontiac and turn it into a show-stopping street machine? Yes, yes you can. This is our 1969 Pontiac GTO that we dubbed as Project Henchman. We did all kinds of upgrades, including custom paint, parts, you name it, and turned it into what we believe a Judge should be. Kick back, relax, grab your popcorn, it's gonna be one wild ride.
You're watching Power Nation. Let me introduce you guys to the newest addition to the family, a 69 Pontiac GTO. You might be thinking that it's a little rough with the front end missing off of it, but don't worry, we have most of those parts. And I'm here to tell you this back piece is pretty nice. Let me show you what we're working with. The exterior is the factory color espresso brown with the painted black top. And yes, that was an option. This old car has lived a sheltered life. The body isn't all beat up, the trim is in nice shape, and when it comes to rust, well, it really isn't any. One of the things that made me really want this car is the condition of the upholstery. Now you can look through this thing and it will tell you how the car was taken care of. Just check out the knobs. That chrome is extremely bright. And on our carpet, it has the factory carpet in it. Now we've got some pretty substantial plans for this thing to go along with it. It's gonna get trick suspension, cool transmission, fancy paint, just to name a few of them. Now for today, I want to get the chassis out from under this thing and it all taken apart so that we can take it to the sandblaster and get a coat of color put on it. That way we've got a solid foundation for all of our upgrades. I guess that's enough jawing for now, and it's time for me to get to pulling some wrenches. It's always got to be one. I've been told before that we make things look way easier than they really are. But in this case, the GTO doesn't fight us much at all. With this old Pontiac being pretty cherry, it sure does help things out. The floors and the frame isn't all gunked up or full of crud, which makes the separation of the body and chassis a breeze, and the bolts basically zipped out. This project isn't going to be nowhere near what some would call a chalk mark style resto. But frame off, yes. Doing it this way, we get to assemble the suspension, drop in the engine and trans, and build a product that we're proud of. This GTO rolled off the assembly line about as basic as they come. A person could just bolt on new parts, but we want everything to look nice. Grinding and cleaning a frame for hours on end isn't what I call a good time. I mentioned to you earlier about making things look easy. The fellas at Blast from the Past does it for sure. You can drop off some ugly, they'll work their magic. But wait, we still got a couple of surprises for you. While we're out and about, I had to stop in and catch up with an old friend of mine. This gentleman has a treasure pipe full of old Pontiacs, and we need a couple of pieces for our GTO. Now today is a day we're going to be doing a little bit of scrounging, and that sounds like a whole lot of fun. To see this many old school muscle cars that all have the same badge on the front is pretty rare as a sight. But looking through here, this stuff has a lot of wealth to it. And I'd speculate that if you were to itemize a lot of the pieces out, there's a tremendous amount of money. Now what we're looking for today is a couple of pieces of trim because ours is dented up. Well, I wound up finding one good piece already off. If you go to a salvage yard and the part isn't on the car, that doesn't mean it's close by. I found this one in the trunk so we don't have to remove it. Up here, this is the piece that we're really needing. This old car being so crunchy, the clips probably will just, crumble right off of there. Score. Now with what we started with, all those original components wasn't gonna cut it. So we have to start with a solid foundation, and that's this beauty sitting right here. It didn't start out looking this good. When we disassembled this GTO's frame, it was a long way from pretty, but the fellas at Blast from the Past powder coated it and turned it into this beauty that we're working on today. With our old car, we definitely didn't want it to drive like one. You know what I mean. When you hit the corners, it feels like that thing's sloshing around. So our solution was to pick up this full kit from RideTech. It's got coilovers on all 4 corners, big sway bars front and rear, plus all the goodies to make this kit work really well. Now all we really need to do is get it bolted to our chassis. You may have noticed on the end of our links these special little bearings. This is what RideTech refers to as their R-joint. It gives you greater articulation, increased stability, all the while smooth operation. Also here on these uppers, they're adjustable. So once we get the ride height figured out, we can set that pinion angle. For our rear axle assembly, we went with a quick performance 9-inch that's been tailored built to fit right under this OA body of ours. Now it has a lot of features going for it. One, it's got a 1350 billet yoke on it. It also has 31 spline axles and a true track as a pause unit. Now these things will definitely take the abuse that we're planning to throw at it. All I gotta do is get this thing bolted into place.
Now before we cinch these U-bolts down, you need to center each one of the brackets, kind of get them nice and level. You really want them to match from side to side. Oh, too far. Oh, wrong way. That's pretty close.
Well, we're ready to go ahead and bolt on our links to this rear sway bar. And this setup is kind of unique. It has some adjustment that you can make on it. Now what I'm referring to is the placement of this lower mount where it goes onto the bar. If you leave it here toward the tip, well, that'll make it a bit softer because it has more leverage on this bar where you can slide it back a few inches and it stiffens things up. We're now ready to install our lower control arms, and these are significantly better than those factory ones that we removed. They're tubular, so that means they're lighter and stronger. Plus, they've got these Delrin bushings, which help to eliminate that rubber squish that factory ones have. Plus, they've been engineered to dramatically improve handling. Whenever we ordered our spindles, we had a couple of options. One is the pin style, similar to what came on this car from the factory. It has an inner and outer bearing, you know, the big rotor, and then the castle nut screws here on in the end that holds everything in place. The other is a hub, and that word refers to the hub bearing that it would have. This is what you normally will see on your later model cars. The reason that we are going this way is for a couple of reasons. This is substantially got some strength to it. Also, it gives us the ability to run Corvette brakes, which are larger and lighter than that original setup. So this one just made sense for us. Whenever it comes to your hub bearings, you've got a couple of choices that you can go with. We found this Duralast C7 hub assembly on the AutoZone Pro website. It is a C7 setup. Now the reason we went with this one is because the bearing itself is a little bit heavier than the other one, a C5 or C6. It also doesn't have this little speed sensor hanging off the end of it. With our application, we don't really need it. So that makes this thing the perfect little part for us. Whenever you go to install this, there's a couple of tips for you. One, it's nothing wrong with putting a little bit of grease or anti-seize around here. That will make it go in a lot easier and potentially come out if you ever have to service it. Also, our kit comes with some new bolts, and they recommend you to put some thread locker on there. Now, we're not quite ready to do all that because we still have to set the brakes up. And I don't want to be dealing with all that stuff. And once we get the brakes figured out, shimmed up if you will, we'll take a few bolts out, seal them, we'll be ready to move on. Now we're going to shift gears from the suspension to the brakes. With the spindles that we're running, it gives us an opportunity to upgrade to C5, C6 style brakes. And well, what we're going to be using is this setup from EBC. It's their red stuff pads along with their Blade Sport high carbon rotors. If you'll notice, they have a unique V pattern that helps to keep the rotor and the pad cooler. It also helps to keep the surface clean. One thing I really do like about these is the silver coating. Not only does it look great, but it also eliminates that unwanted corrosion that you oftentimes see through the wheels. There's a small amount of setup that we'll have to do before we can just put everything together. The first step is you need to slide your rotor into place and then use some like washers and a couple of lug nuts to hold this thing where it needs to be. You don't want it kind of drooping or anything like that. The setup that I'm talking about is the placement of your caliper bracket to the rotor. You want to make sure that rotor's nice and tight. Doesn't have any wiggle. It's nice and smooth. Now we'll have to bolt in this little caliper bracket first. Now with our kit, it has these small shims or spacers that have to go in to offset this bracket. Sometimes doing this stuff, it almost feels like you need 3 different arms. And you want to also snug this thing up. It doesn't have to be crazy tight, but it needs to be good and snug. What you're going to look for is the spacing between your rotor surface and your little bracket here. This side is considerably tighter than it is on this side. So that means we're going to have to space this thing out. You want to do that on the lower and upper side. With this old calibrated eye, you can tell that this and that looks pretty close. We're going to verify it with a feeler gauge. And that feels nice. Over here, same way. Sometimes whenever you're pulling your brand new calipers out of the box, it can be a little confusing to which side is which. All you need to do is look at the bleeder screw whenever it's mounted onto the car. What you want is it to the top. If it's mounted to the bottom, or whenever the fluid comes in its port, it's going to run straight down and never bleed out. It's a simple basic tip, but it's that easy. Muscle car, a group of two-door American manufactured vehicles that are produced for the thrill of hitting the gas, shredding the tires with their high-performance engines, all with the purpose of stimulating the driver, passenger, and anyone close by with a pulse. In '69, you had serious choices to make if you were in the market for power. A big block Charger was it if you're a Mopar fan. Being lucky enough to have a 440 or the infamous Hemi living under the hood of what you were driving meant one thing: performance was your middle name. If you bleed blue, a fastback Mustang would more than likely be the ride sitting in your driveway. When it comes to the engine, you had options, anywhere from ripping small blocks to powerhouse big blocks. Let's say you wanted a GM, but not a Chevy. If you craved something that was strong, powerful, and bold, a Pontiac GTO Judge is all that and then some. That's what drove us to what we wanted to build. At first glance, it's obvious. It means business. So let me describe to you what our vision is. We want to go black, and I mean all black. With mile deep paint, the trim, it's going black as well. Not paint though, black chrome. We want to take what Pontiac started with and give it a bad attitude. It's not a Judge. You can call this one the Henchman. Well, we've been making some good progress with our Pontiac, the chassis, drivetrain. It's pretty much taken care of. Now it's time to jump onto the body. Now, I really enjoy doing some paint work, but I'm not a fan of all the labor it takes to make a really nice paint job. Now, one of the pieces that I've been dreading is this front bumper piece. It has what's referred to as the Endura nose. And if you guys know what I'm talking about, well, this thing isn't a piece of steel. Well, not exactly. It's actually kind of like a rubber molded piece that is wrapped around a piece of steel. These things are notorious for having issues, like this big crack. Plus, this one's had some paint work done. You can tell because it's shiny up top and rather dry on the bottom. Plus, there's a few nicks and gouges here on the beak, which makes sense with it being on the leading edge of the car. So to set ourselves up for success, that means we're gonna have to make a lot of dust. I need to sand or remove all the paint off of this thing. And that means we're gonna have to spend some quality time with the DA. Now, to get the job done in this situation, we're going to be using just the standard old sandpaper method. Some folks have been known to sandblast those rubber bumpers, and that can be done, but you have to make sure to babysit it, because if you get too aggressive with that media, well, you'll end up damaging the material, that rubber, in a way. And I've seen them almost come out fuzzy because the sandblaster was just too aggressive. Now, before you throw this thing into cruise control mode, there's a few things that you need to look at. And what I'm referring to is the piece that you're going to be sanding. This nose cone has several different body lines on it. We've got two that run on the top, two on the bottom. Both of those are on each side. Plus, there's the fender line that goes all the way up and down it. If you were to take this sander and run across those, well, what you will do is reshape that. You will lose that definition. We want to retain this original look, so we got to make sure when we're running this thing, we don't do more damage than good. Where you decide to start is kind of irrelevant, because all of this material has to come off the bumper. We're using some 180 grit sandpaper to get the job done. If you notice, I keep the sander moving the entire time. I'm not putting too much pressure on it, basically just holding it to the surface. That allows the paper to cut more efficiently and last longer. Well, we have our bumper cover pretty much all stripped down to just the bare rubber. Now, after a little bit of closer inspection, this thing's a lot rougher than what we were anticipating. Now, the shape of it's in pretty much what we're looking for. However, there's nearly 50 cracks in this thing. If you have some of these blemishes and you're not real sure how deep they are or if it's really a crack, well, here's a tip for you. All you need is some glass cleaner. Simply spray it on the surface, wipe it off, and then as it evaporates, if that blemish stays wet, that tells you it's kind of deep. If it flashes off really quickly, well, it's no problem. To repair these, we're going to have to V it out. That gives us a place to put the bonding agent. What we're going to use is a 2-part epoxy, and that will basically make the repair. We'll have to use some 36 grit to get in there to give us that little trough, if you will. And we're going to have to do that a bunch of times. We're going to use some 2-part epoxy to make that bond repair. So what I'm going to do is squish some of this stuff out onto my little board here. That ensures that it's mixed properly. That's this special little tip. And then I'm going to go over to the car, or to the bumper better yet, and squish this stuff in there, then use my spreader to smooth everything out. Man, that's some thick stuff. With this epoxy, you have about 5 minutes of work time, and then I like to let it set for over an hour before I sand it. Now, to get the job done, I've got this hard block and some 80 grit. Now it's time for some hand jobbing. We've got all of our cracks basically fused together. You'll notice by all the stripes that we have. And if you look even closer, you'll see that there's some small imperfections. How we're going to solve that is using some of this flexible polyester glazing putty. Now, we're going to put this stuff on from one end to the other and then sand it out, and we should be in really nice shape. When you mix this stuff, you want to fold it, not stir it. If you decide to kind of spin it together, well, what you'll do is aerate that and create a bunch of little bubbles. Now, we're not really piling this on here. It's a nice little skim coat. Now, don't expect to wipe all of that in one go around. That's kind of being a little bit ambitious. And if you mix that much up, well, really and truly, you won't ever be able to get across there before that stuff hardens up, and you'll just throw a bunch of stuff away. You gotta go. Can't stop that chemical reaction. Well, we've got our part here in the booth, and it's time for us to start spraying on some primer. The guys have our other paint booth kind of tied up, but that's not going to hold us back. So we've drug out our Mobile Environmental Solutions paint booth to get the job done. Now all I've got to do is get in here, hook up the hose, and then we can get to spraying. Our mobile paint booth is easy to set up. We put it right in the middle of the garage without any issue. Before we go to spraying on some primer filler, what we're going to be applying is some epoxy. What that does is that helps to ensure better adhesion. And it's just as simple as spraying it on. A booth helps to contain the mess from your painting project, but you still need to wear protective equipment like mask and suit to keep yourself safe from breathing in any of the harmful chemicals. We let that epoxy primer dry for right at an hour. Now it's time for us to apply our gray primer surfacer. We're going to put 2 coats of this on and then let it flash 15 minutes in between those 2 coats. Then after that sets for pretty much overnight, we'll be ready to start final sanding that thing to get it back to its former glory. Breaking it down is just as easy as setting it up. And you can see no mess. Well, we spent several hours rubbing on this thing, but all of our hard work definitely paid off. We still have, let's say, about another hour worth of work on this thing. There's a few little imperfections that we're going to have to touch up and then do some spot priming. But after that, well, this thing's pretty much ready to paint, and it's gonna look nice. I have some good news. We've got 500 horses headed your way. We've got several components stretched out here on the table, and today feels somewhat like Christmas. Just look at all this shiny stuff. You wanna see the centerpiece to it all? This is our 5.3 liter LS from ATK High Performance engines, and it's pumping out north of 500 horsepower.
What should get you excited about an LS? Same thing that does me. They're reliable, they make plenty of power, and they won't break the bank.
Some folks aren't a fan of the LS engines, and you'll hear the argument that it just seems like they don't have the soul that those old engines have. And I don't want to get into that big, long debate. However, I will say this. The description and benefits of this engine is almost the exact same words if you were to describe the small block Chevy way back when.
Well, I'm going to get wrenching on our motor, starting with our oil pan and timing cover. But first, we need to rotate it over and take a look at the bottom side. I'm going to kick this build off with a timing cover that we found at Summit Racing.
If you have a crate engine for your project, this is one of the common parts that you're gonna need to come up with. Summit offers parts like this to make your upgrade go smoothly. Going this route, you don't have to worry about trying to remove old parts from a donor engine that are dirty, crusty, or even worn. We're also using a bolt kit from ARP to dress things up. Once everything is aligned, we can cinch it down.
Now that we've got our timing cover zipped up, we can move on over to the oil pan. When deciding to do an LS swap, an important thing to think about is your oil pan. A lot of your factory oil pans are a front sump. That doesn't work for our project. So the guys over at Holley sent us this rear sump that's designed specifically for your GM muscle cars.
Oil starvation is a scary thought. Installing this component helps to eliminate oil slosh during heavy braking and hard accelerations, which is definitely a couple of things we're planning to do. You guys know how we are.
Now that we got our oil pan assembled, we can put our pickup tube in. But I have a feeling that there might be some clearance issues with our windage tray. Shouldn't be a problem, we'll just pull it out, give it a little nip and tuck, and we'll be right as rain. The reason for cutting the tray is that the front corner actually interferes with the pickup tube sitting all the way down in the hole in the block. The instructions from Holley actually have a template that you can lay on your windage tray and cut out exactly how much you need to. With the tray trimmed up, the oil pan is ready to be installed, bolted, and torqued to 18 foot-pounds. This FiTech kit comes with all the goodies. LS3 style coil packs, direct injection manifold, and a 102mm throttle body to breathe life into this 5.3.
This setup is great for the home builder or the professional that wants the performance and reliability of fuel injection. The kit comes with everything you'll need for your induction system and is designed to get you cruising with ease, plus the install is straightforward. Next, we jumped on the belt drive. If you've opted for the black components, kind of like we have, there's a little step that you should do to help make sure everything goes smoothly. What I'm referring to is all your contact points of where it's going to touch that accessory bracket. Make sure that it's raw aluminum. If it's got the powder coat on like this one does, well, it won't make correct contact. Therefore, the electronic side really won't work. All you got to do is use one of these little buffer wheels, skin it back, and you're ready to move forward. The LS engines oftentimes get a bad rap for not being a pretty engine. I don't know about you, but this one isn't hard to look at. The black and silver here and there gives it quite a menacing appearance. I'd be proud to pop the hood of my ride to show off this jewel. We've got our 5.3 500 horsepower power plant that we got from ATK up here on the workbench. Now, if you remember back, we've bolted on quite a few performance goodies like this FiTech fuel injection unit. Now, we've made several different procedures trying to tie this American powertrain TKX back here to the backside of the block. With this final step, we're going to set the proper air gap between your clutch release bearing and the fingers here on your pressure plate. You don't want it pushing against or touching the fingers of the pressure plate, and too far out is bad as well. So if you have one of these setups and you've got the car and whenever you crank it up, you try to put it in gear and it kind of grinds or doesn't shift properly, there's a chance that your tolerance is off. Now you're going to have to make two measurements. To do this, I like to use a combination square with a caliper. The first thing that we're going to measure is the distance from your mating surface on your bell housing to the finger of your pressure plate. Now I like to use this thing because when you put it up there, if you notice, it keeps it nice and true. And then all you have to do is slide your little ruler in to touch one of the fingers. Now let's see what this thing measures out to be. We are 302. Okay, now we need to measure from the clutch release bearing surface to where the transmission would bolt up to the bell housing. I'm going to spray a little bit of slickum here onto this O-ring inside of there and onto this little shaft to make it a little bit easier to go on. Five, 2, 9, that's 500 thousandths. So basically we're looking at about a half of an inch. So what we're going to have to do is use some of these shims to space this thing out for our proper tolerance. What we're looking for is anywhere from 100 to 200 thousandths clearance. So I'm going to use 4 of these little shims, and that should put us right at that sweet spot. All right, let's remeasure that. I'm looking at this is 283, and we're needing, that's 200. Technically, we need one more. $290. That will give us 121 thousandths. That'll do it. Okay, now the next thing we need to do is remove this bolt so that we can install our retainer stud. Okay, finally we're ready to install our transmission. Now to do this, you can do it one of two ways. One, slide your release bearing off, put it inside of the bell housing, and then snake the transmission in here while trying to keep all that aligned, or remove the bell housing and install it first. That's what I'm going to do since I'm kind of working solo. This is probably one of those instances that you should ask for help, but maybe you're just too stubborn to ask for it. Let's see. There it is. Regroup just a little bit. Look at that. That's hurt. That's really what you want. You don't really want to fight it. If you have everything lined up, it goes right into place. This was a little bit snug, but that's mainly because everything's new. Whenever you're cinching these down like that, you want it to pull up with basically no pressure on it. If you go to tighten it up and you really have to get on that ratchet, you've got something misaligned. You'll notice this is our chassis that we've been working on out of that GTO project. It's got some trick suspension under it, and I can't wait to sit behind the wheel of this old muscle car. We also have our LS power plant that's been kind of kicking around in the shop. We've been toying with, should it go in the GTO or should it go into that Nova? Well, from where you're sitting today, I bet you can guess which one it's gonna be.
Well, if you remember when we got our GTO, it was just a roller surrounded by a box of parts. And to make this a numbers matching car, we'd have to track down that original Pontiac power plant. And my hopes for that aren't very high. I figure why not throw a little bit of late model horsepower into it? All that's left is to get it in there. Well, the engine mounts we'll be using are the Hooker Black Hearts that we got from Holley. They're an 11 gauge stamped clamshell with a polyurethane bushing. And these are the heavy duty kit designed directly to bolt to the LS. Well, we've already installed the frame side mounts. Now that all that's left is to put these onto the motor. So I'm gonna grab a cherry picker and a cradle so I can work on it at eye level. Now there's a lot of different methods you can use when putting a motor into your vehicle, several different types of cradles. You can either do the old school fashion with a chain and 2 bolts, or you can do something like this. Now this allows you to adjust front and back angle as you're putting the motor in, which is really helpful if the body is already on the chassis. Which you can see we have a bare chassis, and plus our accessories are already on here and they're nice and painted. So we want to use the one with these straps to keep from scarring up our new valve covers. Before I install the motor mounts, I'm going to apply a little bit of blue thread locker to the hardware. You don't want to be going down the road and these back out on you. Don't mistake this stuff for chapstick. We're ready to lower the motor down into the chassis and we're pretty well lined up, but we'll make a few small adjustments as needed as we work our way down. All right, let's see how close we can get. Shift back just a hair. Catching on something. That out of there. That way. Perfect. Well, we're ready to install the transmission cross member, and we're going to reuse the factory one that we had powder coated with the chassis. I just need to check fitment to see how well it's going to work with our new transmission. Well, with the transmission cross member in here, I can see that I have a couple of options. If I want to reuse the factory mounting holes in the chassis, I'm going to have to trim out the cross member because it contacts the transmission. But if I slide it back a little bit, I can use one hole on each side and I'll just have to drill some new ones. With our transmission bushing in, we can take a couple of measurements to make sure it's centered in the car, as well as we can check the incline of the motor. So we want it to sit about 3 degrees. 4 1/4, 23 3/4. We need to go to the driver's side 1/4 inch, if we can. That's where it needs to live, right there. Go ahead and tighten these down, hold it side to side. With our transmission centered in the car, now we want to check the angle of our drive line. We want it to be somewhere from 3 to 3.5 degrees. We're sitting about 3.3, so that's right in the money spot. Well, I'm glad this LS and 5-speed finally found a home, and no better place than in this GTO. I'm going to get my mess picked up and then we'll be on to the next step.
The next thing that we're going to do is tackle the fuel system. I need to run some lines from the front to the back, and whenever you're doing something like this, well, you know there are a couple of options, but it all depends on kind of where you're at and what you're trying to accomplish. So what we're going to be using is this, some of the metal line that we got from Summit Racing, because it's far more durable and doesn't have nearly the issues that that rubber hose does. However, this does have a couple of drawbacks. It being metal, it's far more complicated or difficult to bend and flex, and usually it requires a few more tools to get the job done correctly. But we're okay with that. Now with this stuff, we're also going to be running it majority of the way here in the middle from our tank to our fuel injector rail, and we'll only end up using some of the rubber stuff, probably about 12 inches or so. But it's time for me to straighten this stuff out, make some bends, mount some lines. We've got our hard lines bent up and mounted to our chassis back behind us, and now it's time for us to connect this steel tube to our braided little flexible line here. Now obviously we're going to need some form of an adapter. Now you've got a couple of different options that you can go with. One is using this little insert with a tube nut, but the way you got to use that is you have to flare your line, and it's required to go at a 37 degree, not 45 like we've showed you in the past. Now the process is exactly the same, it's just a different die with a different angle. Now, there is one thing that is a little bit different from what we showed you before. Using these inserts, you only flare this single flare. This insert works as the second part of it. You want to make sure to use the correct side of your die, of course, 37. If you were to use 45, it won't seal properly. And get my other side of this thing. Flip it around. All right, now let's just move this along. Now all we're going to be using is just the cone side, because again, all we need is a single flare. Now if you look close on this thing, you'll see that it doesn't have the little folded over part. That's what would be the double flare. And then when you slide this thing up, this sleeve helps to support that flare. Now for this thing to attach to this thing, we need an adapter. All it is a number 6 AN union, male on male. And then we can simply attach this one to it. It's that easy. Now there is another way that you can put a fitting on here if you don't have the big fancy flare tool like what we've got here. And what you use with it is referred to as a compression union. Now as you take this fitting apart, there's this little brass part in here, and that is what does all the sealing. Take the little nut, slide it on there, and then your ferrule slides on to here, And then with your fitting, you put these together and then you just simply tighten it up. Now how this thing works, I'll unspin this to show you, is this little ferrule is compressed. It's kind of squeezed between the two fittings and it causes the big brass thing to bite into the tubing. And this is a one-use only type setup. Now, with these things, you don't ever want to use them for brake lines or anything like that because it's downright dangerous. But for the pressures that we're under here, this fitting would work just fine. A while back, I ordered several components from OPGI so that whenever we were finally ready, this thing's all black and shiny, we could fall right in to the assembly. Now, one of those components that I ordered was one of these assembly manuals. And the reason for that, well, I'm no expert when it comes to this particular car. And I've built a lot of muscle cars over the years. And whenever I was sanding on that front bumper cover, I realized there was a bunch of holes and stuff. Also, when we picked this car up, it came with a truckload of parts in random boxes. Now, to assemble this car accurately, well, you need some information. This catalog has all of that stuff. It shows you diagrams with brackets and bolts and exactly how the components went together per the factory. That can save you a tremendous amount of time whenever you're trying to figure out what does this part go to, or whenever you're assembling the front end of this car, how to figure it out. Or we got that subject matter that scares people to death, wiring. If you're needing the schematics, it has that, in case you're having to track down a problem that no one likes to deal with. There's just so much information in here, it's actually pretty cool just to thumb through. We've got the spare tire, the jack location, and the orientation that you would assemble it. And let's see what else. You got the front bumper. I actually find it kind of fascinating flipping through going, oh yeah, I'm gonna remember that. Oh, I'm gonna have to come back here. Now, another thing that I noticed in this book, which is pretty cool, we've all heard of that GTO Judge. This thing has the exact dimensions of the graphic package. So if you're in the middle of a restoration with one of those, or you're trying to build a tribute car, these things will give you exactly the information you're looking for. And it may seem a little bit old school, but it's a book, and you don't have to worry about your screen going dark. Well, we're pretty much ready to mount our body, and then we can mount our fuel tank up under the car. Now, here's a little tip for you. I went to the AutoZone Pro website and found this Duralast filter. Now, what it's for is an 82 to 84 Corvette. So that means it is fuel injection capable. It has these little nipples right here that are designed to have a hose to slip onto it. It doesn't have those big metal lines and that kind of thing. You'll have to use a fuel injection clamp, but what's great about it is you just simply put these two together. Then we'll need one of these fittings that has a hose barb on it as well, which is screw onto our other fitting that will be on the line. The next thing you know, you just slide that onto your fuel pump. It's that easy. Blocking and sanding can have you out in the shop swearing, sweating, and working muscles that you didn't even know you had. After 10 hours of that, if you ain't nursing a backache and or a sixer, you probably ain't doing it right. With the hard part done, it was on to cleaning and masking. Now this step ain't necessarily easy, but it's definitely less labor intensive. The paint we decided to go with was House of Colors Jet Black. We're gonna let this sealer do a lot of the work for us. We're spraying down our first coat of sealer in a black color. Then we'll follow all that up with a couple more coats of black base to set it to perfection.
Well, as we lift the body off of the rotisserie, there's a few safety things you want to think about. You're not only protecting the body of the car, but yourself.
Peyton's right. Dropping this thing on the floor or getting somebody hurt isn't what we're after. Now, if you'll pay attention to our lift in our car right now, you'll notice that a large portion of the body's hanging off the backside of that arm. And what that equals to is when you go to pick it up, it could fall off the lift. Now in the past, we have taken and put a whole bunch of like weights up here in the front floorboard to hold the front end down, but luckily for us right now, our car still has the column and the dash, so we have that added weight. You just gotta make sure you know what you're doing whenever you go to pick this thing up.
Well, luckily for us, our lift has these rubber pads on the feet, and that protects the body. Some guys will use 2x4s or whatever else they can get their hands on, and that's a recipe for disaster. Your shiny new body could end up on the floor.
Oh God, cars are shaking. This car is shaking.
We've got to install a new bushing kit so that we can mount our body onto the chassis. And what we decided to go with is a setup that basically is straight OEM. Now, what that means is these are a rubber bushing. There are companies out there that offer them in more of the urethane setup. You also have to pay attention to each and every placement of these bushings because they have different thicknesses and diameters, and even some of them don't allow a bolt to pass through them. And getting these kind of mismatched, well, what you run into is once you try to cinch it down, you can actually tweak the body and the doors and trunk won't open properly. So pay attention to where they go. But luckily for us, our kit also comes with a handy little chart that tells us exactly where this stuff needs to go.
Did you just keep all these up there?
Yeah, I kept all of them over here. Yeah, this car actually only had them, I think, on the outside. This car had those bushings up front. Rail needs to go that way in the back.
Ooh. What do you think?
That should be close enough.
She just slid down. It's close right there, buddy. Let her down.
Yeah, I didn't hear any catastrophic failures, so.
All right, come on up. Put that in there. Will it work? Let's see. Nope. So, yeah, don't say. I don't have another nut. I need you to go out there and get a, it's 7/16 is what they are. I need like 2.
We've got our body on and we're continuing to check off the things on our to-do list. A while back, we went ahead and ran our hard lines that go from the tank to the engine. So now we need to mount our pump and the tank itself. If you choose to use a pump that's externally mounted, there's a couple of things that you need to do. One of them is to mount it lower than the tank because that helps to keep the pump fed whenever the fuel is siphoned from the tank. Another is to mount the pump as close to the tank as possible. Normally, these type of pumps work a whole lot better whenever they're pushing the fuel from the tank up to the engine, as opposed to mounting the pump way up there and it having to draw it up to the front of the car. So with that said, things can get a little complicated whenever you're trying to find the perfect location. Plus, if you're getting close to suspension, you gotta stay away from it, along with your exhaust. Luckily for us, Holley has the answer that we need as far as a one-stop shop. What they offer is an EFI conversion kit that has everything like the tank, pump, cinder, fill neck, and even the straps to mount it all. I need to go get a tape measure and I'll be right back. I'm gonna start off by measuring to see how deep the tank is. It's right at 6 inches. That one should be the same. Then we'll take a mark on here.
6 inches. And set my cinder over there. Mark where I'm gonna cut my tube. This one is supposed to be an inch shy, so that'll go right there. Before you get too carried away, put your clamp in there. It'll make us a little easier on us. This is one of them type of tools that's pretty handy. It lets you know if you accidentally leave it on. That's pretty handy. It helps you to keep from using up electricity whenever it's not in use, and serenades you. So it helps to like lower your blood pressure. Y'all heard of white noise? This is just heated white noise. Push that on there. Make sure you're shyer than 6 inches. Now all this here is doing is sealing that little O-ring in there against the wire sleeve. Whenever you go to tighten your hose clamp up, also make sure that it's not on the forward side of the little swollen spot. Give it a little quick test. It's nice and tight. Oh yeah, we're just shy of our 6-inch mark, so we're good to go. Now sometimes on these things, the whole pattern on here is kind of offset and it only allows you to go in one way. And I bet that's the case for this fuel level cinder. Now we're also using cork gaskets here. Sometimes people get it in their mind that they need to put a bunch of sealer and that kind of thing on here, and that's really not the case. Oftentimes with cork style gaskets, all you need to do is put them on dry. And if you were to use a sealer of some sort, it actually works as a lubricant and oftentimes causes that gasket, when you go to tighten it up, to kind of pinch it. So just try to refrain from doing that type of thing. Drop this in there. Jiggle it around. Let that screw through the gasket. Now when tightening these things up, there's a little O-ring under the bottom of the head of that screw or bolt. So don't get all crazy and put a cheater pipe on your screwdriver. Just run it down nice and snug. Star pattern. You'll be able to tell when it's snugged up. Now we need to do the modifications that's needed to our fuel sending unit so that everything reads properly once we mount it in the tank. Now essentially with your little pivot here that's on the sending unit that works up and down with your little floater here, it needs to be right in the middle of the depth of your tank. Ours is at 6 inches, so we'll have to measure 3 and put this pivot point right there. If you get it too far, too short, well, it will give you an inaccurate reading, and then that'll make your gas gauge read improperly. What we're needing is 3 inches, so we're gonna have to throw some of this stuff away. This is kind of one of those universal parts, and y'all know what that means. That means it doesn't fit anything directly. Now with 3 inches of this thing, I'm gonna make a mark on our pivot. That's where our pivot is. What we need to do, mount her right there. Now with this, you wanna be as close to accurate as possible, but it's kind of like fuel gauge being off ever so slightly. Right there. Maybe bolt cutters. Snip. Oh yeah, I wonder. It only goes one way. So let's just see what fits. Put a couple of these screws in to hold the gasket in place. That'll do it. Are you leaking on that thing?
No, it's where you put that other pad on there. That had something jumped on it.
Need to hook up that fuel sending wire.
It gotta go through the frame right here, right?
Yep. There's a washer that's got to come off there. Got it?
Yep. Ready, keep on, keep it on.
Don't do it. Yeah. That'll make it look a lot better. Well, I can't believe it. We got another thing all finished up. Getting that tank under here shortens that list quite a bit. Now it's time to move on to the next one. You know, there's a lot of parts of the restoration that kind of, let's call it glamorous. And then there's other parts that isn't very exciting at all. This next step that we're gonna be doing, well, it ain't nearly as exciting. But when it comes to a quality restoration, it's pretty crucial. What you'll run into is leaks and noise and all that kind of stuff, the things that you don't really want. Now also, another problem is you can actually damage your car. With your door, this little rubber serves a couple of purposes. One, it keeps it from rattling, along with keeping debris and stuff out of the car. Also, there's little bump stops that kind of space this thing out to keep you from busting up your paint. Plus, not to mention, some of this stuff is seen and people will judge you by the quality of your work by what they're looking at. This old rubber up here is all dry rotted and cracked and looks really bad. What's great about most of this type of stuff, it usually doesn't cost you a whole lot of money and you make a vast improvement. I'm kind of wiggling this thing back and forth. Kind of helps to separate it. Now with it, we're not trying to save it by any means, but we also don't want to mess our car up either. Channel that it sits in on both sides, the inside and out. I'm just working the outside piece first, and that lets it just fall out of the other one. Might should have pulled this out before I painted this car, but it'll be fine either way. This is definitely one of those kind of tasks that you gotta have some patience. However, it will do one thing for sure, doing this type of work, it'll make a mess. Now, whenever you're ordering your weather strip, it's always a good idea to kind of hold off until you need it. You don't want this stuff sitting around for a couple of years if your project's gonna take that long, because with it sitting on the shelf, it firms up over time. Now, we picked this stuff up from Steel Rubber Group, and we've used a lot of their products in the past. So whenever you're using something like this, you always want a good quality part, and that's the reason why we went with Steel. Whenever you go to put these things in, this end right here is what locates everything. You gotta mount it here at the base of it and then work it up and all the way over. What I prefer to do before I put any adhesive at all in here is kind of get it set into place. Now this thing kind of has that little groove it's gotta set in. Got it roughed into place at first, and then I like to come and work everything in. You want that seam nice and tight up against that piece of stainless steel. Sometimes it takes a little finesse, if you will. Just keep working it. Next thing you know, it looks nice and pretty. If it comes out or if it's loose, that tells you what you need to know. Now we're gonna hold off on putting the weather strip that goes all the way around the door right now because I don't have the glass in it, and we're planning to upgrade to power windows, and that's a whole nother thing that we're gonna have to get into. So what I'm gonna go ahead and install is our two little bump stops that go here inside the door. Now, oftentimes when guys install these, you'll see them grab a little screwdriver, and what they'll try to do is kind of mash this little cone inside of there. But what you'll run into is if you're not careful, this thing will actually shear that little stud off, and then this thing is basically useless. The way I prefer to do it is make sure that you use plenty of lubrication. Basically some glass cleaner will get the job done. sometimes with this thing, you can basically just really push it, hold the pressure on it, and it'll go. In this instance, it didn't work like that, but that's okay. It's one of them little tasks that in all reality sounds like it's super easy. Next thing you know, 20 minutes spent just putting rubber bumpers in. Some dudes want to use other forms of lubricant like oil or grease or something like that. I don't like using that stuff in this instance because that stuff will stay on the surface. This glass cleaner will evaporate basically and go away. Where that oil, what it can do is actually make it easier for this thing to come out because it's got a lubricant still on the little studs. So that one, that pairs on. Door even closes better now.
When our GTO rode off the assembly line, this old thing was quite a peach, and it came with quite a few options. However, it's got one that if we were buying this thing, we would have clicked a total different box. What we wanted would have to be a 4-speed. Having the thrill of a manual shift, y'all know what I'm talking about. The ability to dump the clutch, run through the gears, well, that'll definitely put a smile on your face. This thing now is going to have a 5-speed in it, and we need to make it work. It's going to take a few components and a bit of work, but it's going to be all worth it in the end. Now, we're going to have to do quite a bit of disassembly. We're going to be adding that third pedal over here. Sitting here looking at this thing, well, that's good that that piece come off. It's kind of one of them situations that when you get home at the end of the day and the wife asks, "So how'd your day go?" Supposed to say, "Oh, it's great. It went wonderful. Got it." Now we gotta get this metal bracket. Awesome. Now we need to install our hydraulic clutch assembly that we got from American Powertrain. We're gonna have to remove this bolt to slide out our brake pedal. So what we wound up doing is ordering a standard set of replacement pedals to put in here. We're only gonna be using the brake pedal, of course. Now, the first thing we gotta do is zip this thing out. So we gotta make a little noise. I like to put a little bit of dielectric grease on these things as good measure to keep them from squeaking. This is actually pretty simple. May not have had to take that bracket out. Remember, you don't want to cinch that thing down crazy, because if you do, you'll bind up your brake pedal. We don't want that. Easy enough. Push that one out. Man. Oh yeah, way better. So far, I'm putting it in the right way. Now, hopefully this goes smooth as butter. Oh, look at that. Heck yeah. The next thing that we're needing to do is find our location for our reservoir. Now, a lot of times people get kind of ahead of themselves and just slap this thing on the firewall and move forward. Problem with that is you can run into some interference problems because you don't want to screw and glue a bunch of stuff to your firewall and then later having to move things around. All we got to do is just slap this thing into place. You don't have to have all the bolts and the brackets and stuff hooked up. I'm really only going to mark one of these right now because I can't get in there because this thing's in the way. Let's get that off. We can dial it in to perfection. Whew, can't back up now. Now, using this method of putting a screw in, you probably could have put it up there and marked it and been fine on both sides. I like doing it this way because it gives you an opportunity to basically mount it, make sure that it's not sitting off to one side or the other. If you were to mark both holes and then you were off just a little bit, y'all know what that means, more modifying. Torque that to correct spec. Heck yeah, not too shabby. Once everything's the point where it's going to live, now you got to bleed the system. The way I'm going to do this is a little bit odd than what most people would do. I'm going to put a vacuum source up here, and then I'm going to draw fluid out of this cup where our hose is going to be submerged into, instead of trying to bleed it by pumping the pedal a bunch of times. And this way is actually a little bit easier. You got to make sure that the bleeder is open, even more so. Make sure you got the right wrench. It's my first day. I need to put quite a bit of brake fluid in here. It's a lot easier to put it in here now. We can pour some of that back in there if we wind up not using it. Now with this little vacuum kit that we've got, it has a tube that you can put on the cap and onto your reservoir. There will be some fluid get in here, and then as you start letting the air out, you'll see the bubbles come through there. Put a couple connections here. Hook this into the hose like that. Now get to pumping. What you want to keep an eye out for is to see any air bubbles come out up here into that clear hose. If you'll end up doing it a couple times and don't really see anything, probably in pretty good shape. I think we're getting close. Now, if I only had a paper towel. We don't have any more bubbles coming out of here, so we can go ahead and remove this. Put your finger over this hole. Now you can take your little hose out of the big container down here and tighten up your bleeder screw. Now let's plug this dude into the bottom of our reservoir. Let's see if we got a pedal. Should feel some resistance on this thing, plus you should be able to hear the actuation of your pressure plate. Oh yeah, that thing's good to go. That's her. With our clutch hydraulics completed, now we're going to take care of a few other procedures on this old car. And I'm here to tell you that this thing is suffering from a serious condition, what I refer to as the aorta disease. While we've got that steering column out, we ought to go ahead and remove our dash pad. This thing's all busted up and it needs to be replaced. And while that thing's out, we ought to go ahead and freshen up this steel dash because it's faded from the sun. And to do that properly, well, we ought to go ahead and remove the windshield because it's scratched up. Once the windshield's out, well, we ought to go ahead and take care of these little studs that are missing on both sides that's broke off that hold the trim clips on. Whew, sure hope this patient survives. Now also with this, there's a few things that you should keep in mind, and that's your safety. And I know a lot of people don't like talking about it because it's all boring, but just keep this stuff in mind and it may save you a quick trip to the ER. Use your pair of gloves because this thing has been known to pull through the windshield, and then you got glass and sharp edges everywhere. Trust me, I've been there. Also, you need a pair of safety glasses because that stuff, whenever it breaks, you know it splinters and goes everywhere. This is a cheap insurance to help keep some of it out. Now the process with this thing, we're gonna use a very primitive tool, what oftentimes people refer to as a pull knife. You just take that blade, kind of shove it up under the glass, wiggle it around a little. And you don't want to put a crazy amount of pressure on it, but you do need some. Also be a little cautious, because if something was to if that blade was to break and your arm was to come out, that you don't get stitches on the back side of your elbow from hitting something sharp. And luckily for us, we're really not trying to save this piece of glass. We can get a replacement one. So if we do bust it, it's not that big a deal. And there's that half. Whew, a little lightheaded. With it cut all the way around, this thing should lift out relatively easy. To push on it, you don't want to use your fingers, kind of use the entire part of your hand. Apply some gentle pressure to it. That stuff is still sticky, but you'll notice that it starts to tear apart. Well, to believe it or not, guys, I've never taken a dash pad off a 69 GTO. There is screws and stuff or nuts usually on the back side up through here. So we'll have to pull all this out. Now up in this area, I don't really know because there's a bunch of gauges and stuff in the way.
Can't be all that complicated. We're just gonna keep removing stuff. I don't know if it looks as awkward as it feels right now, but it feels pretty weird. Jeez, this is some of that screwing that's too easy to do with a tool and too hard to do without. Let's see here. Well, like a glove.
Cool. That's a plus. Man, them dudes are tight. Oh yeah.
I don't want to break nothing, but I'm tired of monkeying with this thing too. No, that don't come out because that's not making blooming sense, fellers.
This is going to be a huge undertaking. 100%.
With the dash pad out of the way, now we really need to prepare for some painting. So we'll just clean this really, really well, scrub it down, and we'll probably still have some fish eyes, but I'm hoping we don't. Now to scratch this thing up, I'm just using a little red scuff pad. Don't ever get crazy with it. I'm just trying to knock off the shine. Once I get this done, I will come back and clean it once again, use an air blower, and I will also come in with a wire brush and dig out a bunch of this rusty stuff in this trench where the windshield goes. Once we get that, we can tape this thing down, paint her up. Okay, now I'm going to apply some rust converter to treat our corrosion. It's kind of one of those quick and dirty, you too can paint your dash at home. Well, our dash top turned out pretty nice, but it needs to sit back there and dry so that we can move on. So I'm going to get busy going ahead and taking out the rest of our dash pieces here and getting them cleaned up. We picked up a new unit from ABC Moparts. They offer components to fit many makes and models, so if you're looking for a hard to find piece, you may give these guys a shout. You want to be extremely careful with this stuff. It's old and it's kind of delicate. Now, I don't know if you guys know this or not, but I've got to remove my headlight switch from here. And with a headlight switch, you always had the headlight knob. To remove one of these is you pull the headlights all the way on, push the button on the back, then the knob comes off. Perfect example of making sure something else that doesn't need to come off first before you go to pulling. You'd never guess you have to remove all the hardware. Maybe coming. Oh yeah. Just need to wiggle it. One serious snug fit. Well, we have all of our pieces cleaned up and we're ready to start moving on toward the next details before we start all the assembly. Now, a lot of times on your dashes, you'll run into having some silver accents around a lot of the bezels and knobs and so on. And our little old GTO is a perfect example of that. Now, a lot of folks oftentimes use some silver permanent markers and take them and kind of draw around here. But what you can run into is as you're applying it, whenever you have to reset and try it again, it seems like you're wiping off some that you just put on, and you're almost like chasing your tail. Now, there's another way that you can do this, and you don't really need any special tools. You just really need some paint, a flat surface, some masking tape, and a steady hand. You want to make sure that your surface that you think is flat is actually flat, so a quick rub of your hand. Put it on your edge and kind of pull it tight. What you'll want to do is take your paint and basically spray it onto this surface. Now, what we're kind of simulating is almost like a printing press. Once that paint's wet, you'll take this piece and kind of mash it and then lift it up. Now, with that, as long as the surface is flat, it will transfer on here and you're in good shape. And remember, it's only going to be as deep as the paint that you spray. So let's go ahead and get started. You want the paper to be nice and wet. And with silver, of course, that stuff will kind of start moving around on you. Another note, I think you get the highest with silver paint. So we should be feeling pretty nice after this. See, check that out. That look nice? Now, I've been asked before how in the world I figured out some of these ways to do some stuff like this. And I tell them, well, whenever you're building cars on a budget, sometimes you have to figure out ways to rejuvenate old parts because you don't have money to buy the new ones.
Well, Tommy's still got a few things to finish up on the dash, so while he does that, I'm gonna go ahead and swap out our heater core for this new one that we got from Duralast. And there's a pretty good chance that that's the original heater core that was still in the car because it's that old brass copper style. And with our firewall and our heater box and everything disassembled right now, this is the time to do it. Because really, it's gonna take 5 minutes, a couple screws, get this thing swapped out. That boy don't want to come off of there. Granted, it has been on here since 1969. Just about got her whooped though. There we go. Here's our old one. Sure enough, we've got some corrosion around the tube as well as a little hairline crack. So, as luck would have it, as soon as we fired this thing up, this has been pouring coolant all over the floorboard. So, go ahead and get this swapped out. Better be safe than sorry. All right, new heater core is installed. Looks like we are ready to throw this thing back up in here. Seal everything up, call it a win. Whew. Stay. And now that I've got that installed, I'm gonna help Tommy finish slapping our components into our new dash so we can finally drop it into our '69 GTO.
Man, you're in a hurry.
I'll let you lead.
You've got those studs in there. It just basically slides right in there. So just make sure you don't have any wires that are hitting anything.
Got 2 studs in the car too.
One's bigger than the other one.
When was the last time you got tangled up in the floorboard of a GTO?
Never with another man. saved the screws so that we wouldn't lose them, and guess what? They MIA. Yay!
Them boys on the GM assembly line had this down to a science, I'm sure.
Quick question. Now with all that in place, can you plug up all the radio connections over there? Or do we need to pull it back out?
Yeah, I think we can make it happen. At least my skinny arms will make it through there. That's more of a dig on me than it is on you.
Awesome. Let me get you the lid. They make a special wrench for this. Try this again. Yeah. Fixed it. LS swaps are pretty common, and what you'll run into is you've got late model wiring and probably like a standalone harness, and then you've got the vehicle harness. So what we're needing to do is connect our dash to the engine, and our car just had a switch on the oil pressure. So we've got this simple little adapter here with the sensor screwed into it, and what we've chosen to do is use the location right above the oil filter. Now it's super simple, but if you're running a set of headers, sometimes you can run into interference problem. How's it going over there, boss man?
I'm just kind of working on a few of these tight spots near the firewall, because here in a little bit we're gonna be trying to put our front sheet metal on, so stuff like those fuel fittings down there and this brake line, it's easier to tighten them up now than when we get all that stuff on the front. We also had to swap out our brake hose because we didn't realize it when we put it on. This thing was probably 14 inches or so. Sometimes what you can run into on that is these little brake lines will get caught in between your shocks or your other suspension components, and it'll actually pinch them, so we went ahead and shortened up those hoses. It also looks a little bit better too.
Is that them valve covers you had to modify slightly?
Yeah. Joys of hot rodding, isn't it? They look pretty sharp though.
Patent pending.
Yeah. And there's just something about a nice clean engine bay though.
It's kind of some of that stuff that goes unnoticed. You know what I mean?
Yeah, when it looks good, you don't really notice it, but when it looks bad, it's blatantly obvious.
Yeah. We're gonna go ahead and solder this for extra good measure. As that blonde chick said, that's hot.
Try and find the path of least resistance here. This is our primary key hot and power wire to our fuel pump that runs back to the tank. It's gotta come through the firewall. Try to keep it out of the way of the foot pedal so it don't get pinched. Might have to extend it a few, but as is life. Just run this right down the edge of the floorboard. Yep, we're gonna need another 7 or 8 feet probably. Always give your connections a good test pull. Oh yeah. Can go a couple different directions when you're running a fuel pump wire back to your tank. Technically right now we could drill a hole right there, but put all that work into that nice trunk spatter paint job. I'd hate to drill a hole right through and have to put a grommet and just be a little bit of an eyesore. So I think our best route is just go ahead and run our fuel pump wire all along the taillight harness, extend it out to the fuel pump wire, call that good. Definitely gonna need some more length. Story of my life. Now, this is a little technique that I learned working in a few hot rod shops. Some people like to apply the torch directly to the solder, but I think it makes a little bit more of a solid connection if you kind of preheat your crimp, let the solder just melt down into it, and it'll kind of get down to the nooks and crannies a little bit better. And wiring is one of those things where there's more than one way to skin a cat. Everybody's got their own system that works for them. As long as you don't see any of that blue smoke, you do you, Scotty P. Yeah, I like to put a little bit of electrical tape anywhere I got these little clips here, just to keep that wire from getting pinched. Little trick of the trade here. I can use this wire clothes hanger to see if I can feed that wire to the top of the tank. Yahtzee. So we're just gonna use a butt connector and some heat shrink, call this thing done. Gotta hold your tongue just right. You know. We got plans to put some pretty trick interior into this old Pontiac. I won't give away too much, but what I will say, it'd be a shame to put all that nice, brand new interior on this junky old insulation, so I'm gonna get this crap ripped out of here. Sometimes you can find treasures underneath this stuff. Loose change, build sheets, love letters, all kinds of stuff. I don't think I've ever seen a GMA body with this solid of a floor in my entire life. Just gonna apply some of this rust treatment here. This comes in many different forms. You can spray it on, you can apply it like I am with an applicator, but no one will be none the wiser for another 60 years. This stuff is designed to basically convert kind of that brownish, reddish rustiness to almost like a flat black. That seals it out and seals out the oxidation. Stuff they come up with these days. That should do it. We'll let that sit for a few hours. Once it's fully cured, we can slap on our new sound deadening. Now what we're gonna be installing is more of a OE style kit that we got from the guys at Summit Racing. Now it's pre-cut, pre-formed, pretty easy to put in, but there are a few things you need to do when you're putting this stuff in. Sometimes with even these direct fit kits, they give you a little bit extra, so some trimming may be required. This one's not fitting too shabby. Might lighten up the edges a little bit. Now, since this GTO is gonna have black interior, black paint, and black chrome, it's gonna be prone to be exposing itself to some heat. So it's gonna get hot in this thing. So this sound deadening and this extra insulation will at least give us somewhat some temperature control. You can see on little spots like this where it bunches up, just chop a little relief cut. There we go. It'll sit in there a little more nice and flat. Now you don't need to get this hotter than 6 kinds of hell. Basically, you just want to get it warm enough to loosen up the adhesive underneath. It'll also give it a little bit of flexibility so it sits in there nice and tight. Eventually over time, as the car goes down the road, it's going to heat up, expand, cool down, over and over and over, and eventually it'll settle into its foundation and I have to worry about it again. One piece done. Fairly nicely. Shoot, for no more than a couple hours worth of work, say we got some pretty serious protection against heat and elements and all kinds of stuff. Gonna be one sweet summer cruiser. Just gotta get the AC working now. When it comes to restoring a project, it truly is the little details that can make all the difference in the world. Now, in the case of the package tray on our old GTO here, this thing's actually not in too bad a shape. And initially we threw around the idea of just like buying a brand new one, stuffing it in there and calling it good. But turns out these things are a little hard to come by. So our next best option is to go ahead and see if we can refurbish this old one. But luckily, to fix this thing, it's not gonna take a whole lot of time or materials, and it's gonna look pretty sharp when we're done. This is definitely one of those times where it's more of a marathon than a sprint. Don't wanna go ripping this stuff off like it's Velcro. Trying to preserve it as much as you can. This mesh will break and crack if you get too aggressive with it. There is a little bit of a technique to this. You want to kind of use the mowing the lawn technique where you're just going all the way down, all the way back, and that's going to allow for a nice even pull across the entire thing. All right, we got our layers peeled back here. So the next step is we're gonna saturate this entire thing, which I know sounds counterintuitive because water damage is what got us in here in the first place, but that's what you have to do to reform this corrugated surface. So I'm gonna dump a little bit of water on it, get it completely soaked, and then we'll set something heavy and flat on it to reshape it. Can use a spray bottle here, and if I could find one, I would totally be using it. Now the idea here is to let this water soak in to the corrugated surface, and it's gonna soften it up, making it much, much easier to reshape and reform. Yep, that's working nice. You can see this kind of has like a little pop can effect to it, so I'm just gonna keep saturating it until that goes away and sits a little flatter. If I had a horse trough, I'd just dunk it in there, let it soak for a few minutes, but this'll work too. All right, I got this thing just about fully saturated. Got a big piece of cork board over there that I'm gonna set on this thing. It's gonna do a couple things. It's gonna help bring it out and flatten it out. Just gonna set this cork board right on the seam of our panel here. Nice and flat. Throw these weights on here. Just give us a little bit more extra insurance. Should look pretty sweet when it's done. Well, it's been a few hours. Looks like our package tray's nice and dry. About as flat as a pancake too. Now, before I take this cork board off, I want to go ahead and see what we can do about ironing out a few of these bubbles on our mesh. And to do that, you're just going to need a good old standard old household iron. Now, I've got this set on kind of a medium-low heat because we don't want to get this too hot. You can actually melt the kind of rubbery plastic material that this is made out of. So keep it moving. Don't stay in one spot too long. Just take it nice and easy, nice and smooth all the way across. And you'll know when you're kind of at the correct operating temperature when you can glide your iron across and immediately touch it with your hand. It should be warm enough to where it's moving the material, but not too hot to where it's burning your hand. Just gonna keep working from the center out to get all your wrinkles out. Did not wake up this morning thinking I was gonna be ironing out a 60-year-old package tray on a 69 GTO. Just never know what the workday's gonna bring you. Better get that back into Tommy's dressing room before he gets fussy. Well, with everything flattened out, we're good to start doing some gluing. Now this is a pretty easy setup. All you gotta do is get you some rattle can glue. What you wanna do is spray this stuff on nice and thin, like not get too crazy with it because it will bleed through on the other side of the mesh. You're gonna let that flash for a few minutes. You get to pressing it on. All right, we'll let that sit for a few minutes until it's dry to the touch. All right, looks like our glue is all set up, so we're gonna glue this thing down from the center out.
With our old Pontiac here, we need to take care of our tail lights so that we can get them installed in the car and make a little more progress. Now, I'm kind of astonished that these things are in such bad shape considering the car that we bought. That was kind of a low mileage car. It was in really good shape. And you look at these and they've got quite a bit of corrosion on them. They're all pitted up. With all that corrosion all the way around the bezel in here, it's kind of flaked up. So I want to shape that stuff up. Then I'll get these sandblasted and then spray on some textured paint. We're not really trying to take off a lot of material here. Just crisping up that line. We could have had these refurbished, but I mean, the time and effort that the plater would have to go through to work their magic onto this piece would be very expensive, be really time consuming. So when I seen these first time, I told myself I can do something different and actually save a little money. No lie, these refurbished could cost $1,000, $2,000 because they're in kind of rough shape. What we're doing is a little bit of time and some paint. Probably have all said and done $100 in these tops. That's how to do it. Now we just need to blast them. Man, that's a lot of debris. Oh yeah. Taking a look at this bezel, that sandblaster did exactly what we needed it to do. It kind of opened up a lot of those blisters in there. Now our solution to the ugliness on this thing is going to be applying some wrinkle paint. What's great about this is it will give this entire finish that wrinkled look, burying all those little bitty imperfections. Now whenever you're applying this stuff, they suggest you to paint it in a few different directions. Now, normally you would go across this way oftentimes, but since we have to go in those multiple patterns, this is just the first one that I started with. Come in at a different angle. If you notice, this is kind of a 45 degree. This helps to ensure that you get all the coverage that you're looking for. Plus, for this wrinkle finish to work correctly, it needs to have a decent amount of material on it. Now, we're sitting here in this fancy paint booth, and you don't really have to have one of them to do this type of project. However, you do want to make sure that you do have plenty of ventilation. Now we're gonna use this fancy heat gun. Basically just turn it on high heat, start this thing warming it up, and you'll notice that the wrinkle will begin, and we'll basically walk it all the way across this panel. Yeah, it's already starting to wrinkle over here. This material gives it kind of a unique look. And is it correct for this car? No, we know that. But it's kind of one of those specialized coatings, kind of like the Mopars had back in the day. This is kind of like that. It doesn't, when you touch this stuff, it doesn't feel like smooth, shiny, but it gives it kind of a cool effect. Well, we've made some pretty good progress for the day, and I have to say I'm pleased with the transformation that our taillight here has made. It only spent about an hour and about 20 to 30 bucks. That's pretty good. Whenever you're working on your project, one task that can sure enough eat up a whole bunch of time, and that is fabbing up your exhaust. Now, whenever you're working with something like we are, and you're doing an LS swap, that can actually kind of multiply the factor a bit. Luckily, Holley and Flowmaster offers a kit that can make exhaust a whole lot smoother. Now, what we've decided to do is go this route for a lot of reasons. One, it's time. Two, is also for that Flowmaster sound. Now, with Holley, they offer exhaust manifolds that bolt right to the heads, and they have a mid pipe, and this exhaust system should simplify things quite dramatically. However, you guys know how we are. We complicate things a little bit more and a little bit more. You remember back, we put a 9-inch Ford and also a coilover rear suspension. So we may end up having to fabricate some of these tailpipes, but we'll just have to wait and see.
As Tom mentioned, this is a borderline factory replacement setup, so we're using all the factory mounting holes for our hangers. Makes it a little bit more efficient. Another thing I like about this setup is that you don't need a big, expensive, fancy welder to put this in. It's got all the clamps and hardware you need. Really, some basic hand tools, and a weekend with a buddy, and have yourself a new exhaust system. Oh, you said don't scratch the paint on it.
Right.
Man, you clocked that about perfect for me.
Shoot, I'd almost nail that, dude. Put your clamp on it?
Yep. I'm like looking right at it, but you still made me question it.
Not gonna lie, I did it too. That's why I said it. Yeah, that's nice.
Yeah, you like it?
Makes me feel better. Not gonna lie. There's a lot more clearance back there than I thought it was gonna have.
Well, we're just about ready to slap some sheet metal on the front of our GTO here. And the first piece of that puzzle is gonna be our core support. Now, you don't wanna go just slapping this thing on here all willy-nilly, because if it's sitting in there cattywampus, well, the rest of your body panels are gonna be sitting in there cattywampus. So you need to make sure that this thing is perfectly straight, level, and parallel to the rest of the car. Now, to do this, you're gonna need a specialty tool known as a tram gauge. A tram gauge is a vehicle body alignment tool that uses adjustable rods with pointed ends to verify if the distance between two reference points matches your specifications. They are a lot more precise than your standard tape measure, and I'll run you through how to use it here in a sec, but there are a couple more measurements we need to make first. Now, the first thing we want to do is make sure that the top of our core support is parallel with its mounting surface on the frame. So we're going to use our digital angle finder here. Check our angle here. It's like about 3.2 degrees. Top of the frame. 0.5. So we need to take our ratchet strap and pull this core support over just a smidgen. That's pretty close right there. All right, looks like our measurements are within about half a degree of one another, so we're ready to move on to the next step. Now the next thing we need to find is a consistent mounting point for the first rod on our tram gauge. Now there's a few holes for us to choose from, but this one right here is about the same OD as the rod, and that's gonna help keep it centered, so let's just make sure it's centered. All right, it's in about 2 1/4, 3 3/4. 2 1/4, 3 3/4. Okay, we're in business. All right, so we got our tram gauge here. Now basically how this little guy works is that it's sitting at about 41 3/8 on the side measurer here. Now I'll just slide her out. You can see, moves in and out like so. Set it into our first adjustment hole. We're gonna drop the other point into the fender bolt hole on the firewall. All right, we're sitting level on our bubble. We're about 69 15/16 on our measurement. Got everything locked in on our sliders. So let's see how close we are on the other side. All right, on this side, I didn't move our adjustments at all. We're still sitting at 69 15/16. Our bubble is still level, so we're all squared up. With everything lined up, we're good to go ahead and tighten our core support bushings. Now, if your numbers were off, when you go to hang your sheet metal, you'll definitely know it because you're gonna be seeing some pretty consistent gaps across the board. All right, that looks good. Now, everything kind of rolled a little bit when we tightened those bolts, but we know we're straight corner to corner, so once we start hanging some fenders, gaps on this thing are gonna look pretty sweet.
Today's a pretty exciting day for us because our wheels have showed up. Now that's one component that can definitely set the tone or personality of your ride. Now a few of you guys out there I'm sure are hoping that, we're installing a set of rallies or something like that and it's something 15-inch, but that's not the case. However, I do want to show you what we got. We picked up a set from SHOT. Now these things are custom tailored for our application. And man, are they a good looking piece. Now unwrapping this is kind of like Christmas. That's no lie. Now if you'll notice, that's a pretty wide set of wheels back there. Now it's easy to see that this thing has some significant size to it. It's an 18 by 10, and yeah, it is gonna fit up here in this wheel well of this old Pontiac. Now with SHOT, they have several different styles and several different makes, and you can also customize your finishes. Now with ours, we have a polished hoop with a polished face, and then we've used their titanium color here on the insides and across the lips. Whenever you're ordering a set of wheels, at least for me, it's a pretty nerve-wracking situation because I think about this is a lot of money that you're gonna spend, and if you measure wrong, well, you may be buying something that you can't use. So I thought I'd just slow down a minute, show you guys how I got to this point, so it may be some information if you're looking to buy a set of wheels. Maybe it'll help calm your nerves a little bit. There's a lot of terms and phrases that go along whenever you're going to be ordering a set of wheels. Now the first and foremost easiest one is the diameter. Now our wheel is an 18. However, it is not from the actual outside of the lip to the outside of the other side. Because if you notice with ours, it measures 19 5/8. They don't make a wheel that size. So what it actually is this surface right there on each side. Stretch your tape across there, you'll see it measures 18. Another thing that you're going to need to know is your wheel width. Oftentimes guys think it's from the outside to the outside, and that's really not the case. It's actually where the tire beads on the wheel. If you measure ours, the overall width is about 10 7/8, but the actual width of the wheel is a 10-inch. Two more terms that you'll run into is offset and back spacing. And what that is, the offset is basically where the wheel is kind of set off into the hoop here. And then your back spacing is the measurement between the surface where your hub or the brake rotor is to the back of the wheel. Now, an easy way to measure that is you'll need a straight edge for your back spacing. Simply lay this thing across there, and then you use your tape measure to measure down to that face. That tells us with ours, we have a 5.5 inch back spacing. And then whenever it comes to your offset, you would measure from that surface basically to like the top of this toolbox. We have a 5.5 inch offset. Now, knowing this information is crucial whenever you're trying to dial in the fit of your wheels to your car. Another thing you want to keep in mind is, the rear can articulate, meaning it can go up on one side and down on the other, kind of like whenever you're pulling into a parking lot. So that means that the wheel will tip in or out. So having that extra clearance keeps them from scrubbing on each side of this. Plus, if you buy them big fancy wheels, you don't want to scratch them all up or chew them up and damage what you've worked hard to achieve. Now, also, you want to keep in mind that everything is in order, like your rotor is in place, because sometimes those can be 1/8 or 1/4 inch thick. And if you dial all your metrics in, next thing you know, it's a little too far one way. It could have been that you just didn't have everything in place to make sure it was right. So let's see if our measurements were dialed in. I sure hope so. What that wheel looks like against that black car. It's pretty sweet. Woo-wee! Now if the rest of the car was just put together. It's a big day. Big day.
Back in 1969, you could get a lot of cool options on a Pontiac GTO. Hurst dual gate shifter, tilt column, air conditioning, all kinds of stuff. However, our car was a little bit more bare bones than that, but we still want a few modern twists. So we're going to be adding some power windows. And if you've ever considered doing this swap on your project, but you're worried about the complications involved, Tommy's got a few tricks up his sleeve to show you that this may not be as difficult as you think.
Warning, the following is for demonstration purposes only. You don't need to remove your door skin to install power windows. No GTO judges were harmed in the making of this video. Viewer impression is advised.
Converting your old car to some modern conveniences is pretty much the sweet spot. And that's one of the things that we're going to be doing on our GTO. This car that we have come out with manual windows. We're wanting to convert it over to the electric. Now, we found a company called New Relics that offers quite a few options out there for different makes and models. And so we picked up a kit and have started to install them into our car. I've got an old door here that I picked up from my buddy, Mr. Bill Stovall, off of one of his old Judges. And what we're going to do with this thing is cut this outer skin off so that you guys can see how easy this swap can be. Yeah, fixed it. Dang, that thing's crunchy. We'll probably need to reattach that. First order of business is going to be removing the regulator. Now, normally with them things, they have 3, maybe 4 bolts that hold them in place, or even some cars have rivets and they'll have to be drilled out. So we'll just zip those bolts out and then we can take this out of this thing. We can slide that down. This little track here, we can take it out from the top. Good. Yep, it comes out that way. Just remembered something that I did. And this is where it can be a little bit difficult. It's a good idea when you're putting these in that you get them all started first. Got some of that dad knowledge. Pop preached that to me. Do it. Now we're going to take our wiring harness and plug it into the motor. So we'll put this little pigtail on here. Might should have plugged that in before right now. Might have been a little easier to line up. And then grab your black lead
and red lead. Using your brown and your blue wires here, put on the little jumper wires. So what we need to do is kind of actuate that motor so that we can rotate that arm down a bit. And all I'm going to use to do this is one of our little batteries. Just hold it in place. Bump it. Now one thing that's kind of neat is this hole and this hole is designed so when you bolt the glass in, it gives you access to the little nut. So that's why I have this pivot 2 points here located at that point. That's where you would be putting this thing. And then this piece slide into place. Okay, now we need to drop that glass in. Now we'll bump that back up. Ooh, the other up. Wiring connections are super simple. You've got a blue and a brown. They go out here on number 1. Then when it comes to your red and blacks, your red goes to number 2 and the black to number 3. And then we gotta juice this thing up. So using that little battery, we're just gonna plug this thing into there. And then hook up your little knob here. The window should work. It's pretty sweet. We got a little bit of some labor we're gonna have to do to install those new seat covers for the rear. These original ones aren't terrible, but they're old and the threads in them are starting to pop. You can tell from whenever you get it on it, you can literally hear the threads starting to break. Awesome. Part of the build sheet. Well, that's pretty cool. Show you. I'm gonna have to compare that to the rest of that thing. Alrighty, let the fun's begin. Part of the material we're needing. Yes, sir. Sitting here looking at this thing, you can tell how nice that seat frame actually is. Right up here, the thing's still in nice, clean, bare metal and have hardly any corrosion on it at all. Got a couple of seat covers here, which aren't original style. They got a bit more flair to them. Now it's time to fasten this little dude down, and to do that, we're gonna use these things called hog rings. Now it does require a special little tool, and you take them and put them in the pliers, and then you crimp it down, and that rolls around your cord and your springs essentially onto the seat. Now the way I prefer to do this is you hook it into the seat cover first. Once you get it in there, you can pull it down around the spring and then crimp it. My great-grandmother worked for Chrysler's in Detroit, and they got busy and was zipping these things through there, and she ran her 3 fingers through the sewing machine. And so I'm like, what did you do? She said, I just stopped the machine and pulled the thread out. And I'm like, freaking out still. But she was just like, yeah, wasn't no big deal. That lady was awesome. And yeah, looks pretty good. You want to see a nice tight stretched cover, and you don't want to see any like folds or nothing like that. We do have a little bit of some indentations and wrinkles from it being in that box for as long as it had. Now these normally will come out over time if you just let it kind of heat cycle out in the sun, but if you want to speed up that process, all you need is a steamer. What this does is it kind of softens up that vinyl and lets it be a bit more pliable. You may take a few times and rub it across there and kind of mash it around, massage it almost, if you will. Real nice, Clark, real nice. Wouldn't think that, that's a warm. Yeah, that'll work. Throw it down there like you just don't care.
Well, I pretty much got the carpet set in place where it's gonna stay, so the next thing I'm gonna do is locate and punch out our holes for our seat belts and our seat brackets. Now, if you've never done this before, you're gonna be half tempted to just grab a drill and a bit and just drill straight through the carpet. But I'm gonna encourage you not to do that, because what can happen is the fibers of the carpet will latch into that drill bit and it'll actually start to unravel the whole thing. Instead, grab you an angle pick, straight pick, and a butane torch. Trust me. Start by going underneath, go straight through the factory bolt hole so I can feel it punching through the carpet a little bit. All right, got a little mark here. Right there-ish. Gonna punch straight through here. There we go. Down into that hole. All right, now that I know for sure that that hole is right there, you're gonna grab our straight pick, our butane torch. You can also use a little propane torch. Just gonna heat this little bad boy up. Doesn't need to be glowing cherry red or anything. Just get it good and hot to where it's gonna punch straight through the carpet fibers and the insulation. Swap them out, one pick for another. Straight through. Now this heated pick is also gonna singe like the ends of those carpet fibers, so when you go to bolt it in, that bolt doesn't unravel the fibers either. Look at that, nice straight hole all the way down. So far in this build, we've been able to maintain the style and elegance that a GTO is known for, but with a few modern twists. We're going to continue that tradition by adding in a Cruiser Collection Pro Series set of seats that we got from the guys at TMI. Now this set is specific to a GTO, but if you're building something a little more crazy or off the wall in your garage, they do offer universal kits as well. I'm going to go ahead and slap these brackets together, then we'll do a test fit. I don't know if you guys know this or not, but back in '73, GM introduced what they called the swivel bucket seats. You can get them in most A bodies like a Monte Carlo, Chevelle, El Camino. Those things are really cool. See, what you could do, you'd be sitting in the driver's seat, pull a little lever, swivel the whole seat, and you can get in and out of the car. Get one of these in the car. Like a go-kart in here. Ah, there we go. Mm-hmm. Yep, that'll work. Our 69 GTO is starting to live up to its name and stand on business. This murdered out ride is the definition of a sinister build. With slick black vinyl, custom stitching, and a 5-speed gracing the floorboard. Project Henchman is dangerously close to being finished and becoming America's most wanted piece of Detroit muscle. Got the old
I got you.
measuring tape.
Old eagle eye there.
I didn't calibrate my eyeballs, so.
25 3/4 would be 51 and a half, right? Ain't that what we said?
Yeah.
Yep.
Now back in the day, if you had a 69 GTO with a spoiler, there was two different styles. You could either get a GTO spoiler or a Judge spoiler.
There's the old spoileration.
One thing a lot of people probably don't know about the GTO Judge is when they first introduced the idea and concept behind it, it was supposed to be like a budget-friendly base model option. But then Pontiac got to talking about it more, and then the more meetings they had about it, they realized, no, we need to make this our top-of-the-line performance package.
Can't get better than perfect.
Yeah.
When I think of a GTO Judge, the spoiler itself is an iconic piece of this vehicle. Aesthetically, it is definitely what sets it apart from just a bone stock vehicle to me.
That's pretty dang close. Horseshoes and hand grenades, man. Just gotta
6 of one, half a dozen of another.
just gotta be close.
Could you imagine this was your job at the factory?
That would have been a dream.
I would like to see the factory setup though. How they, gauged each one down the assembly line.
Oh yeah, I'm sure they had some sort of paper template that they just laid down and tunk. Done and done.
All right.
Always think about the placement of your spoiler on a trunk lid or deck lid, as some people call it. You need access for the backside for nuts or bolts, whatever the case may be.
Put it in the center.
And just kind of even up the edges best you can. You like it?
Mm-hmm.
Always makes me nervous.
Glad you're drilling.
Yeah, that should work.
Now, our old GTO didn't come with a spoiler from the factory, but we really wanted to put one on it. And that could be kind of a daunting task and a little bit intimidating, especially when the car's already painted. The first thing we did was measure and find the center point of the trunk, going edge to edge. We went ahead and did the same thing to the spoiler. So once we had the center point of both panels, we were able to set it on there. And then afterwards, we laid down some tape for more of a mapping surface again.
Glad you got the sharp bit.
Then we set the spoiler on the deck lid, just kind of eyeballing it, making sure it was straight on both sides. Then we measured the back of the spoiler to the back edge of the deck lid. So once we knew we were centered left to right, up and down, then we went ahead and mapped out the edges of where the spoiler mounts.
Skin moves a lot, you know it.
Yeah, it does. Now, anytime you're drilling through a painted surface, you gotta go slow. At the end of the day, if you get in a hurry, there's a good chance that that paint's gonna pull up with the drill bit. And another way to prevent that from happening is to lay down some masking tape. That's gonna hold down all those layers of clear coat, base coat, and everything. As that drill's going through, it'll just keep it in place.
5/16.
Thank you, sir. Really no going back now.
Too late.
Woo. Why'd you make me do this?
Glad you're doing that.
Well, that was fun. Let's not ever do it again.
Let's see what your handiwork looks like.
Adding the spoiler to the rear, while it's not a factory Judge package, it adds to the aesthetics of a Judge. We wanted something menacing, low, and sleek. We added our own touches to finish it off the way we wanted to.
Hole number 1 looks great.
Hole number 2 is always the messy one.
All right.
Stick some gaskets down.
Thank you, sir.
And
Put the short end in.
Yep. Now the GTO spoiler was a little bit taller and a little bit wider, so it just didn't flow with the car as well. So that's actually why we decided to go with the Judge style spoiler, because it's a little more mainstream, looks a lot more sharp, and fits the attitude of the car.
All right, moment of truth.
All right. We gotta find somebody to blame. It don't fit.
Blame the guy with the drill bit. You're on my side. How about yours? Ooh, what do you think, buddy?
It's killer, man.
Yeah. We'll grab some hardware and we'll mount it permanently.
Finish her up.
I don't think we're gonna do much better than that.
A little extra on my end. Back in the 60s, it was all about psychedelics and appealing to a bold, rebellious group of teenagers. And that's kind of what Pontiac was going with when they put this stripe package on their Pontiac GTOs. Based on how you ordered the car, you could get a different variation of the colors of stripes and the color of the car itself. It's looking pretty good to me.
Yeah, I love the door fender for sure.
Yeah, that's pretty close.
Yeah, because it is wider here. So
That ought to do it.
all right.
You guys have seen us use Phoenix graphics on a number of projects in the past, including our 83 Hurst Olds and our Bandit Trans Am. No going back now, buddy.
Nope. Little goes a long way.
Some good stuff, though. And now we've partnered with them again to add a few custom touches to our 69 GTO. Now we wanted a traditional Judge stripe, but not traditional Judge stripe coloring. Go ahead and layer up there, big guy. So we asked them to modify the design just a little bit to accent the bronze on our wheels. Don't stick, I'm not ready yet.
When a vehicle's outside in the sun, panel gaps tend to expand and contract with the metal itself. So it's super important when you bridge the gap with your vinyl stripe, make sure you have some relief cuts to keep it from splitting or pulling when the vehicle goes out in the heat. It's like joints in the concrete, guys. You gotta plan your cuts so your vinyl can move with your vehicle.
Now when you're laying graphics on a curved surface, it helps to kind of pull on the vinyl to stretch it and help it maintain contact. I like the color on it though.
Love it.
It's almost kind of the same bronze goldish that the Trans Ams had, the fire chickens.
Uh-huh.
Basically, you can stretch that inner radius of the curve before you lay it down, and that'll kind of help relax that position instead of constantly having to pull against the edge. And in theory, this should keep those edges from curling up on you down the road. A good swoop up on it.
I just want to see from over here.
Oh yeah, we are right on the lines.
Love it.
I'll let you do the honors on the back half.
Got it.
Now, 69 Judge also would have came with additional decals on the front fender and the rear spoiler that actually said the words "The Judge" on them. And we threw around doing that idea also, but we felt like it was just going to be too much. Besides, we're not building a Judge clone, we're building a Henchman. It's perfect.
Looks awesome, buddy.
Dude, that looks killer. That changed the whole look of the car right there.
100%.
Now you just gotta do the other side.
Great color combo.
Matches the wheels. Goes well with the black chrome. Yeah, perfect accent. But I love it. This car came with front cornering lamps, which is a super rare option on these cars. Basically how they work is you'll kick on your lights at night, and then when you go to use your turn signals, it would brightly flash into the ditch so that you could kind of see around the corners a little bit better. So this is what we had. We had the housings and the lenses, but we did not have the bezels. Now the original design of the bezel had kind of a convex and concave shape to it and was a little bit rounded, but at the end of the day, without having the original piece, it was really going to be hard to recreate that. So it kind of worked out in the end because this is a little bit of a custom car anyway, so we decided to just go with a flat piece, and man, it sits in there nice and flush and just flows with the rest of the car. So before we sent it out to Sin-Cut Sin, we had everything dialed in down to 1/1000th of an inch. From there, we generated a CAD file that gave us all the dimensions, the material, and the finish that we wanted on our final product. Once they had that information, it was just a matter of a few days, and this thing showed up in bare steel, and then we just color matched it to match the rest of the car. Now we felt pretty confident that our measurements were dialed in, but there's only really one way to find out.
Let's see, I'm gonna get this down in here.
Yeah, sorry, I know it's a tight squeeze.
You got the front one in too?
Mm-hmm.
All right, I'm gonna let go so I can get the nut.
Okay.
It's important to decide up front whether I'm building a period correct car or I'm gonna build something that's a one-off that I'm looking to do. A show car, if you will, or a driver.
I had to push on the housing a little bit.
Go gadget arm.
Oh no,
There we go.
thought it went into the abyss.
Lost forever. So part availability, part type, these are all things that come into play when choosing your project. You got it?
It's important to know the history of the vehicle you're restoring because it can actually help you in the long run when it comes to sourcing parts. General Motors is a great platform for that.
Housing needs to come.
Which way up?
No, like towards the outside. Like
Specifically like our GTO, it falls in line with the 68 to 72 GMA bodies.
All right, go right ahead.
Let's say you need a passenger side door. The GTO, the Tempest, and the Le Mans all shared the same doors, they were just different trim packages, and the price points are actually different. And so knowing your history and what parts intermingle with one another can actually save you some money.
For our specific build, the GTO, we have front cornering lights. It is a limited edition option in these vehicles that were just not available. So we had to figure out whether we were gonna make some patch panels, weld them up, re-bodywork them, repaint the fenders, or what alternatives can we have? Maybe even 10, 15 years ago, guys, we didn't even have these options. But today, we did something we haven't done before. We drew some patterns, we sent them over to a company, we had some one-off brackets cut for this vehicle, instead of welding up a limited edition fender.
Oh yeah.
Good?
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, those cornering lamps are definitely the cherry on top of the sundae.
They look good, man. Even better than the factory bezels would have.
After a year's worth of work, we finally finished our GTO. Honestly, we've probably got about 2,000 hours into this thing, and there's not a nut, bolt, or screw that we haven't touched. Now, we couldn't really go with a chalk mark style restoration because we didn't have the original engine.
sure looks good, buddy.
Almost complete.
Wanna do a quick light check?
Let's do it.
So we kind of threw around a few different ideas and we decided that we wanted to be able to jump in this car, bump the key, and go coast to coast if we wanted to.
Headlights.
Headlights and...
High beam.
Yep.
Perfect. In addition to our upgrades, guys, we decided that we wanted a car to perform and we wanted something that we could daily drive if we wanted to, track ready at any moment.
Headlights and marker lights. Let's do left turn signal.
Left turn signal.
Yep.
Right turn signal.
Yep.
Excellent.
We decided to go with a 5.3 long block LS from ATK. We also added in a FiTech Ultimate LS intake, throttle body, and fuel management system. And so now we don't have to worry about any kind of tuning issues. The more we drive this thing, the better it's gonna drive.
Check out the rear.
Yep, wanna hit the brakes for me?
Brake lights.
Yep.
So we decided to go with RideTech. We use adjustable coilovers front and rear, upper and lower tubular control arms in the front and rear sway bars, and four-wheel disc brakes. Left signal.
Yep.
Right turn signal.
Yep. Another one of my favorite features of this car is the trim. Now, we wanted to do something kind of different. We knew we wanted to murder it out, but we didn't just want to go and just paint everything black because that's kind of overdone. And we also didn't want to just put the old chrome back on it, so we wanted to put our own flair and spin on it. So we took everything over to advanced plating and they dipped it in black chrome, and this is definitely the icing on the cake, and it's one of the most complimented features of this entire build. Sweet. Let's hit the road.
While we had a vision in mind for this build, it's gonna be awesome. Our process was fluid, so a lot of the decisions that we made were on the fly or throughout the process. So we have a one-off GTO build that you're not gonna find anywhere else. We couldn't be happier.
Between the black chrome, the custom stripe, the wheels, the spoiler, there may be a bunch of GTO Judges on the road, but none of them look like this thing.
First impression, this thing rock and roll.
Best day at work ever.
Hi-ho, silver. Whew. That rattling swinger. You know, sitting in this field of rusty old Pontiacs, I can't think of a better storybook ending for our old GTO. A lot of people will walk through a place like this or drive past a place like this and all they see is a bunch of rusty, junky metal. But for guys like me, Brian, and Tommy, we see the potential in each one of these cars. No matter how far gone something is, with enough time, money, and effort, you can bring one of these vehicles back to life.
Performance, fuel economy, power, it's all right here. You know, days like today, guys, where you get to actually drive your finished project, whether it's a weekend warrior or something you've been working on for 10 years, 5 years, whatever. When you're driving down the road, 2-lane, windows down, 80 degrees, sunny, and running through the gears, it's just a feeling that you can't describe. You know, it's what really makes you a gearhead, really makes you appreciate the fruits of your labor.
This old car don't drive like an old one. Man, it just feels good. Building a car like this takes a lot of work, but it's really and truthfully a labor of love. Now, whenever we drug that car into the shop, it looked pretty decent, and it still had a good bit of work that we needed to do to it. So for us, that was the excellent opportunity for us to modernize this car. With the late model LS, overdrive 5-speed manual, because you gotta have that. Just an automatic slush box isn't gonna give you that thrill of the shift. And then we also did several other upgrades with better suspension, better brakes, and so on and so on. But we didn't really want to change the exterior shape of the car. We wanted to pay homage to what the premier muscle car of the Pontiac division was, which would be the Judge, of course, and kind of put our flair on it. And I do believe we knocked it out of the park as far as that goes.
Anytime I drive one of these old cars, I'm transported back to that time as I was a kid. And I think a lot of people can relate to it in that sense. It like feeds your soul in a way. We had a pretty good blank canvas to start with. It was nowhere near as rough as any of these cars, but you know, it's basically missing its front face and its drivetrain and a few other trinkets. We were still able to bring it back to life with our own vision. But the car turned out better than we could have imagined. It's got its own character, it's got its own presence, and it definitely gets a lot of eyeballs going down the road.
I can't believe a muscle car from back in the day can perform like this today, riding around up and down the highway. It's crazy. There's a lot of satisfaction in actually taking a vehicle, whether it's from a salvage yard or a donor vehicle that you purchase for somebody, or even a driver, and seeing it all the way to the end. You know, there's a lot to be said for blood, sweat, tears, and hard work, and something that you're super passionate about.
Just out enjoying these things is what it's all about. I tell people all the time, just drive it, man. Just drive it.
I kind of wish we had known about this place a little bit earlier, because we'd have been able to find our cornering lights we were looking for. But you know what? The car still turned out great. It's got its own character and its own spin on a otherwise unique vehicle. Walking around a place like this, I'm automatically transported back to my childhood. When I was 6 or 7 years old, I was out with my dad in places like this pulling parts, and now here I am, 35 years old, still doing it. You know, that's the great thing about what we do. This is, for us, it's not a job, it's not a hobby, it's a lifestyle. This is who we are 365 days a year, 24/7. We're car guys, this is what we do.
Man, this thing handles like a dream, like sitting on your couch. Something to be said, guys, for 80 degrees, windows down, 5-speed, and a 69 GTO.
If I ever decided to run away to Mexico or Canada, I'm taking this thing. It definitely gives you kind of that sense of freedom in a way.
Pretty proud of this car. It's a performance car, built to be enjoyed. Go out and have some fun. You know, like ripping through the gears, kind of carving some corners out on a curve. Some of it's conversation, trading war stories between each other, figuring out how you did this or how they did that or what you used to do, or man, let me tell you about what we're planning to do in these things. That's what it's about. Yes, sir. That's what it's all about.